Hey everyone, we're back. Season 3 Talk About It. First episode today, we're going to be joined by Stan Bastek with Atlas Roofing. As we're going through this season, we've added a few new things. We've got a taco counter. You can see it down here. As I'm eating tacos throughout the season, it's going to keep tallying up. And Company Cam and McClinney Mosley and Associates have teamed up to donate $60 per taco. We're going to give that money locally to families that have been impacted by COVID-19. So I'm going to eat a ton of tacos. We've got awesome guests. We're going to talk 10 pieces of advice that our guests would give to contractors. Season 1, Episode 1 starts now.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
What's up, everyone? Season 3 Talk About It, Episode 1. We're joined today by Stan Bastek with Atlas Roofing. Stan, thanks so much for kicking off Season 3.
Absolutely. Glad to be here, man. It's always good to share some taco love with the Company Cam crew, especially you, Gogan.
Yeah.
It's always good to see you, man. So 2020's
Absolutely.
been a crazy year. Good time to get back together and Taco Bout It.
Yeah, Talk About It's going to bring 2020 back to some normalcy. I'm kicking the season off with some Al Pastor tacos here from a local company. I can't wait to dive into these. Before we get into Season 3 and we start talking about, pieces of advice, because that's what we're really created as a theme for this year, why don't you tell the viewers that may not be familiar with you who Stan is and then what Atlas is, and then we'll dive into some advice here.
Yeah, absolutely. Atlas is a manufacturer of roofing materials. We make our flagship Pinnacle Pristine with Scotchgard shingle line, a product that keeps those ugly black streaks and stains off of homeowners' roofs, which helps you sell for a higher price with that value baked in. But we're a family-owned company. We're a company headquartered out of Atlanta, Georgia, with plants and business all across North America. So great to be here. I'm the national sales director for Atlas. I've been with Atlas for coming up on 14 years, and just always love talking and partnering with contractors to find out how we can continue to evolve what we're doing to help and support contractors. That's what we're all about.
You bet. And I think that you're one of the best at, delivering good advice just to the industry. Super excited to have you here on Episode 1. The advice that you submitted. So we sent out forms to all of our partner friends, and we got a whole bunch of submissions back in. And the advice that you talked about was about growing and scaling your business and how it's not just be on revenue and total numbers of jobs. Why don't you go high level on what you mean by that, and then we'll dive into some more specific questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's so many business owners out there that are sort of fixated on scaling and growing, right? And that's an important thing to do, right? I think for a couple of reasons. One, growing your revenue is obviously going to grow your opportunity, your brand, new money being, coming into the business is going to give you an opportunity to look at things in different ways, right? But I think sometimes we get so fixated on scaling and growing is all about more jobs and more revenue, and we get a little bit of a lost sight on sort of the types of jobs, the profitability, of those jobs as well. That has as much to do with your ability to scale your business as just going out and finding new jobs. You could go, double the amount of jobs you're doing, but if you've got to sacrifice so much in market price to do that, one, there's going to be a sacrifice in quality, which is in turn going to have an impact on your brand. And you probably won't make a lot of money doing it. So there's different ways to go about it. There's volume-based contractors out there, and those models work. But you really need to think hard about what does that mean to you to scale and grow your business, and really not lose sight of the fact that can be done in a lot of different ways. Incremental foundational growth is something we preach at Atlas. Obviously, we're a manufacturer, not a contractor, but if you can look at that idea of foundational incremental growth and scale the right way, I think that's important. And I've heard from so many contractors that, hey, I scaled up too fast. You know what I mean? We couldn't really handle the growth, or, I got the sales, but I don't have people to install it. or things like that. So again, I think you got to really come up with a roadmap for how to get there and all the things that affect it.
Yeah, and I think that sustainability that you're alluding to there is so important. Is, obviously we want to increase revenue. We do want to grow as a company, but we want to be here in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And growing too fast, it can be a great thing, or you're growing fast can be a great thing, but when it's too fast, it can mean the end of your company. And we both heard stories that, of companies where they went from 300,000 to 5 million and out of business in 2 years. Like that
Right.
stuff happens. What are some things that a contractor, and this isn't industry specific, but as a contractor, what are some things that I can do to maybe incrementally grow without going and getting a ton more jobs, those kind of things?
Yeah. Well, I've heard a lot of people, people I really respect in this business speak at various conventions over the years. So some of these are not necessarily unique or self-made ideas here, but I think, a focus on your numbers is really important. I've heard guys like Dimitri talk about that. I've heard guys like, Heath Hicks talk about this, where if you really dive into your numbers and understand your numbers, you're going to have a much better chance of maximizing profitability in your organization, but also understanding where change needs to happen. Now, this is a very broad statement, but let's get very specific on this, right? You need to understand your sales machine, right? Because we don't necessarily need to go out and double the amount of marketing spend. We maybe need to figure out, how do I go from a 24% close rate to a 32% close rate? What are the reasons I'm losing jobs, right? What are the reasons that individual salespeople are losing jobs? I think it's really important to think about those types of questions and dive into the numbers, right? Really understanding your cost at a very real level. And cost doesn't just mean your material cost. It also means your labor cost. It also means the cost of your insurance. It also means all sorts of different things that go into, how you've got to cost a project. And then also not giving away the upgrades, right? You shouldn't be giving away deductibles, number one, but not giving away upgrades. Go sell the upgrades, right? Add margin to your bottom line and build value in what those upgrades are. And a lot of that does also go back to framing your competition, right? So really understanding those things, I think, is important. When you get into the numbers of where I'm spending my money in marketing, what's working, what's not, spend more on what's working, spend less on what's not. How are my salespeople performing? How do I give them the right leads that they're going to be more likely to close, right? How do I focus on those things and really understanding that total cost of that project? I think contractors can find so much low-hanging fruit by just diving into the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things I kind of want to hit on there. I want to talk, you briefly brought up differentiation. I want to get into that. But before we do, you were talking about, looking at your numbers and your closing rates and marketing, those kind of things. How important is it to also look at then, once I just look at those closed jobs, maybe it's 24%, and let's look at the best margins of jobs that we did in those closed jobs? Because I think a lot of times people say, hey, my best jobs are the ones that I put the cheapest shingle on, or that I put the cheapest AC unit in, or I use the lowest quality of paint, and those are my best jobs. But analyzing specific, hey, what job did I make the most money on? How important is looking at that so that now I have a blueprint of not only, hey, what marketing's working, what sales is working, but then what's our ideal job?
Right. Well, I think that's a really, really deep question that I think is going to be different for every business. But what we've really been trying to do is translate the answer to that question in a way that we think makes sense to consumer behavior. And there's always going to be a market competitive number for a roof, right? Like that's going to be out there. But if we get too fixated on that number, we believe that that's where we have to be, as opposed to trying to say we can build more value in and control our margin a little bit more. We've been out on this mission to sort of talk about best, better, good selling versus good, better, best selling, because consumer behavior, consumer psychology states that if you offer people three options, one is the cheapest option, which matches what the competitor is willing to do the job for, right? That guy out there that's willing to do the job cheap. And well, I've got to have an answer to that, right? Because there's a percentage of people that will do that. And then there's the people out there that price is really not the obstacle. They're just looking for somebody to come in and give them the best possible value, right? Like, I want the best possible roof. A lot of people avoid that because they're afraid of that price point. And then there's this middle. It's if you price the middle at a little bit more than maybe what the competition is out doing, what you're telling to a consumer, to a homeowner is, listen, this is the best possible roof I could put on. It's more expensive for sure, right? This is what I would go with, right? If, it's a little bit more than you wanted to spend. And hey, if you really want to compare me to that other quote, I can do it for that price, but here's what it's not going to have. Where do most people gravitate with anything we buy? They go to the middle. Right? Yeah. This is what we do. 70% of people are going to go right to the middle, and that needs to be where your ideal profit margin is, right? So it was a roundabout way to answer your question. If we just say, well, gosh, I analyzed my stuff, and when I bought the cheapest shingle and, put the most down and dirty, package together, that's where I made the most profit. Well, that doesn't mean that your go-to-market strategy was right. It just means that you made some extra margin because you saved a few bucks. Yep. So if you price your products where the only one that you're going to deviate price on is that low product, right, that low-end sort of system, then I think what you'll find is you're going to make the ideal margin you're looking for in the middle. You're going to sell some jobs up top that you wouldn't have sold just because you never were presenting it, and you're not taking that price point competitive away from your salesperson, which for a lot of guys is a crutch. I've got to have that deductible only roof, right? So these are the types of things that I think if we think a little bit differently about our go-to-market strategy, we can control our profit margin a little bit more. And the last comment I'll make on this topic, based on this question is, one of the ways to do this is with a good, better, best, but we think that is a problematic thing because you're forcing someone to look up, right? You're forcing someone to say, okay, well, I know what the insurance is going to pay, and I know what my deductible is, so I don't want to pay any more than my deductible. I don't want to go to that best because I'm not coming out of pocket $500. Versus if you go in and say, look, this is your opportunity to make sure you get the right roof on here. This is going to cost you about $2,000 more than your deductible, but it's this premium product. If you lead with something more expensive and back down, they might be more likely to come out of pocket more than if you just lead with, hey, here's what the insurance will do it for. So different way of thinking about it.
No, I love that. I've heard you talk about that several times. I actually, during the COVID-19 pandemic and going to the grocery store those first couple of times, I thought it was really interesting because a lot of the brands that have done things, and I want to come back after we take a quick break and talk differentiation, because I think of two aisles. There was the canned vegetable aisle and then the peanut butter and ketchup. Those are the two places that I'm thinking of. The canned vegetables, all of the higher priced stuff was still on the shelf. That was the last stuff to go. However, in those places where brand was, they've differentiated themselves, I was buying the lower end of ketchup and peanut butter. That was all that was left on the shelf. And it was because people gravitated towards those brands that they recognized. And they didn't need the cheapest peanut butter, man. I got to put the best peanut butter on my toast or on my sandwich.
Absolutely.
And so,
I'm a Jif guy or I'm a Sticky guy.
Exactly. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about how we can differentiate our brand and do some things to, increase those numbers without having to increase the number of jobs we're doing.
Let's talk about it.
What's up, guys? Michael here. Season 3, Talk About It. We're pumped. We got 10 awesome guests. We're going to deliver top 10 pieces of advice for contracting companies. We've got the new taco counter sponsored by Peyton MMA. We're going to do 30 from MMA, 30 from company camp, $60 per taco that I eat this season. It's going to be an awesome season. You guys aren't going to want to miss it. It's
taco season.
Taco season.
Let's talk about it.
What's up, everybody? We're back. Stan here with Atlas. We've been talking about sustainability and increasing your numbers without having to increase the number of jobs that you're selling. We ended with kind of wanting to jump into differentiating your brand so that you're not just seen as a commodity, but you're actually a brand. And what do you guys provide? When we were talking about, the good, better, best, and going better, best, or best,
better, good.
best, better, good. Best, better, good. Going that direction. I think some people are probably thinking right now, okay, that's great in theory, but how do I get people to buy into that? Like, how do I, get them to swipe their card and pay me for this? But what do I do to differentiate my brand? What are some things that you find contractors winning with?
Yeah, well, I mean, what you really got to think about is, am I creating positive urgency, right? And what does urgency mean? Urgency is a reason to buy right now, right? Like and again, a lot of this goes back to that close rate scenario, right? If you offer more choices, you are more likely to increase your close rate because you're giving more options that they don't have to go seek from other contractors, right? We get multiple bids, one, because we're price shopping, but two, because we're also kind of trying to make sure we're getting a broad picture. But urgency is the key to this, right? You want to create an urgency in someone to say, I want to act with you. And this isn't, urgency doesn't have to be the high pressure sale in the home where I'm not leaving till you sign on the dotted line. Urgency is about understanding what consumers want, right? So the biggest obstacle for anybody buying a roof is price. It is the affordability factor here. There's no question about it. Even in an insurance situation, you're still asking someone to go pay their deductible, right? I'm assuming everybody's doing it the right way, I hope, right? But even in an insurance scenario, you are still asking someone to spend money on something. And when you ask someone to spend money on something, there is always an affordability thing happening in the back of their mind. My hands keep disappearing. I love that. So urgency is about addressing the elephant in the room, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people use financing and credit cards in a very reactive way. And we really try to encourage contractors to rethink that approach to create urgency by using financing in a proactive way. This would be a great lead, right? Sometime in the first 5 minutes of your conversation with every prospect, whether that's over a Zoom call and your virtual sales or when you finally get back face to face. Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, listen, I know getting a new roof is probably one of the most challenging projects to take on because we're going to be tearing up your roof. We're going to have a big crew on your job site for a day or two. It's a lot to do, and it's also an expensive project. We're going to do our best to make this process smooth, but let me tell you how we can make this project affordable, whatever path you decide to go. We can work with your insurance company. We're going to do that. We're going to make sure that you get made whole and we get everything supplemented that you're due. We're also going to, we also take cash, or checks. We also take credit cards. So if you're looking to just, pay us with a credit card, if that's the path you're looking to take, we can do that. And we also offer monthly payment and promotional financing offers. Okay. So if you're looking to leverage your cash flow, or if you are looking to have a monthly payment option, we've got you covered. What you do with a rehearsed sort of speech like that you weave into your intro, okay, is you get the elephant that is in the room put in a different room for a period of time. They're not distracted by the affordability factor if you put it out there. So if you get that out of the way early, they're much more likely to hear your pitch. They're much more likely to take you seriously when you're trying to sell them upgrades, when you're trying to show them the value of an upgraded roof. So it's a really important thing. Affordability is one of those things. And finance companies, there's a lot of them out there. Understand it. If you need resources on it, there's so many great resources out there on financing right now, but it is paramount that you offer it on every job, every time. And I think contractors that are not offering financing are losing jobs just because they're not offering it. They may never know that's the reason they didn't get the job, but it might be. So.
No, absolutely. And I love how you put in there, leverage your cash flow, or it's a necessity that I have financing. I want to give a shout out to one of my favorite clients, John Bros with Meredith Home Improvement. He sat down and was talking financing with me, and they do offer it on every single job. And
Yeah.
he said, there was a lot of times where people were taking advantage of financing, and I knew for a fact that they could write me a check. And
Yeah.
I used to just assume, oh, they can write me a check. I don't need to offer financing. But they're the type of people that say, oh, you have a 0% interest or some sort of deal where now they can have cash in their pocket still and get this roof paid for. So I love that idea of making sure you're offering it on every single job. Let's dive even a little further into that differentiation. You talk creating urgency, those kind of things. I love when you talk about that bear-proof cooler, the Yeti cooler. I'm guilty of. I just went out and bought a Pit Boss smoker, and
Oh, buddy.
it's one of those things where, did I need a Pit Boss? Probably not, but I went with it. What are some things that you see contractors doing to, differentiate themselves when they're out trying to sell, so that they can sell these upgrades and add these warranties on, but it doesn't seem like it's a big deal to the homeowner then?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to differentiate. I think some of those are branding and marketing things. Some of those absolutely are product things. So you're talking to the manufacturer. We really believe we have differentiated products that help contractors sell, and warranty programs, building in maintenance plans into your offerings, right? Some of your upgraded offerings could just be saying, hey, this includes a 5-year maintenance plan where we'll be out to blow the leaves off the roof, twice during the fall, and we're going to do a checkup on your roof, right? Like the cost of sending somebody out, think about it, right? If you have to bake in 5 years of calls, right? What is that cost that you would have to build into that just to, again, create differentiation? There's so many ways that it's being done. The key is to be a really good observer of your market, okay? Understand what your competition's differentiation is, okay? Figure out if those are things you need in your offering, and then try to find the things that are missing. Try to find the things that homeowners are likely not seeing. So part of being a good differentiator is just being a really good observer of your competition. The other part is actually having tangible value added features and benefits for the homeowner. You mentioned a Pit Boss smoker, right? There's probably lots of other options that are not quite as expensive, but you probably did your research on that. When you look at a Yeti cooler, as crazy as it sounds, right? It's a bear-proof cooler that keeps ice cold for a week. It's a ludicrous thing, but some people are like, golly, man, I gotta have that, man. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
And I think it becomes more about the brand for Yeti at this point, like it's a status symbol. But when they first started out, they were selling to whitewater rafting companies and fishermen and, fishing charter companies and things like that. And people were going on hunting backcountry trips. So they created a specialized product, but what they really were able to do is they figured out how to maximize the marketing of that to make it an everyday product. That is when you really create something powerful, right? Like what, Apple has done. They created something that nobody really ever thought they would ever need. An iPhone, a touchscreen iPhone with all these things. I remember when the first one came out, it was like, who's going to buy that thing, man? I love my BlackBerry, and it is the only phone that you see these days, So I think that you've got to observe the market and find what is not being offered, right? And then figure out if you can build your brand around that. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't, mention what Atlas does with that, with our Scotch Guard. There are great stories with all manufacturers out there, but what we observed in the marketplace was that we're putting on a roof that's supposed to be all about the look, right? When you put a roof on, it's 40% of what you see from the curb. And we identified with 3M really that there's a huge missed opportunity to talk about curb appeal and long-term home value. So when we're working with a contractor on that good, better, best scenario, we're saying your better is our pinnacle product that's got Scotchguard in it. There is proven research that shows people are willing to spend more money on something that's got a lifetime guarantee against stains on the roof. It's just going to look better longer. So that's the way we try to do it. But contractors really are unbelievably creative with their marketing. I saw a guy that had an ice cream truck that he drove around to his job sites. I see guys that, put up lemonade stands in the neighborhood. I see guys that do so many unique and creative things. I think that maintenance program, I've seen several people implement that, and I just think it's so creative. And then the video marketing, drone technology. I mean, it's, technology has an incredible power to help you be different, because not everybody's using technology to its fullest extent. We use like 15% of the capabilities of a CRM system or a visualization software, so sometimes it's just in tweaking the way you make your presentations in the home, or over Zoom, right? So long answer to your question, but you've got to find things that feel uniquely yours, and you've got to figure out how to brand those and make yourself stand out.
I love it. The maintenance program plan, I think that's awesome. It works in roofing, it works in landscaping, it works in HVAC, it works in all of those spaces. I want one last question before we kind of tie this all together. Let's talk about that pricing, and whether that's on, hey, I go back to where you talked about we take credit cards, or hey, we have this maintenance program. Myself as a homeowner, when you come and say, hey, this is what we offer and this is our price, I want to pay that. How important do you think it is to bake some of those things into that asking price and give a discount from that, as opposed to saying, well, the price is $10,000. Oh, you want to use a credit card? It's actually $10,360 or whatever now. Yeah. How important is it to bake those things into my price and then always step down, as opposed to tacking on little fees?
It's the finer points of how you market that, I think, because you want to be viewed as a transparent company, right? Because that's where the trust comes in. And trust is really important, not just when you're trying to get a contract signed. Trust is really important throughout the job. And guess where trust is the most important? After the job, right? After the job, that trust is really important, because that's what leads to referrals and whether or not people are going to write good things or bad things online. Anyway, I'm answering your question in a roundabout way, but transparency is key for a couple of really big reasons. One, you don't want someone to, if you get a surcharge, you feel like you got had. Right.
Yep.
So I think that's just put yourself in those shoes when you get surcharged. But number two, it's illegal in a lot of places to surcharge. You have to be transparent about those fees. But it's just like the deductible conversation. It still happens, right? People still try to slide it in. So I think it is really important to say, okay, what I'm going to offer 3 financing packages, and I'm going to offer credit cards, right? And so the average cost of offering those packages is going to be 12% or 7% or whatever that is, right? You should bake that into your overall job cost. And if you get told that your price is too high, or I have a competitive quote, the easiest path from my perspective is to say, okay, well, I can offer you a cash discount, right? So that's one thing I can do for you. So that is perfectly fine, because you're saying, hey, this is my price, right? Okay, this includes any way you might want to pay. And if you get asked for a discount, you can say, I will offer you a cash discount, but that's what I can do. In that situation, you haven't surcharged anybody. You have been fully transparent that my price is my price, but if you get that competitive, then you can go and offer a discount and just do it under that guise, right? I'm not going to offer you that discount if you still want to swipe your credit card, but I can offer you a cash discount. Then you put the onus back on the homeowner to make the choice, as opposed to saying, here's my price, and oh, by the way, if you want to when you ask for credit card, it's $500 more. That doesn't feel good.
Right. And I'm even thinking, with that 5-year maintenance thing, maybe that's baked in, because I think there's so much value to being on the property that it's probably worth it to just do that 5-year at no cost, but bake a little bit extra in, and then they say, I need it a little cheaper. You know what, Stan, not a problem. We can take that 5-year maintenance program. We can do away with it. It is an awesome deal, but we can take $300 off, and it's now you putting them in a position where it's like, well, I kind of wanted that. That was a pretty awesome feature. Yeah. And then they see the value. So I think
if you're a remodeling company doing more than roofing, maintenance programs are an incredible way to keep a direct connection with your customer to sell them other things, right? So I think you just got to think about this in bigger ways just than your sort of fixed cost to offer something like that.
Absolutely. So I want to tie this all together. Absolutely awesome advice. Great way to kick off episode 1 of season 3. But Stan, the big takeaway for me is, scaling and growing your business, if that's your goal, great. But I think dialing in on, what you're already doing and maximizing what you're already doing is crucial before you go and try to scale. Make sure that we know the numbers, that we're maximizing what we're getting out of the current jobs before we go and scale. Would that kind of sum up everything we've covered here today?
Absolutely. And as a business owner or a manager of a business, right, your ability to scale is your ability to think bigger, right? And so, you've got to own those numbers, you've got to own those processes, and then you've got to hire people and train them the way you want it done so that they can do the things that your time is distracted with, and then you can go focus on other things. That's one of the things I've heard from so many companies that sort of couldn't figure out how to take that next step until they invested in a process, hired somebody to replace themselves in that process, and were able to go focus on that next step. So it's really, if you go into the weeds in order to come out with them, I think it's a great path up.
Absolutely. Well, again, Stan, thank you so much for kicking off the season with us. Always love having you on. Next week, we're going to be joined by Matt Grassmeyer of Hail Trace. You guys don't want to miss that. I went ahead and ate 5 tacos on this episode. Remember, $60 per taco going straight to charity. I'm going to keep trying to eat at least 5 per episode. But Stan, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week.
Always a pleasure. See ya.
Let's talk about it.